Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. Can't forget about that. From San Francisco, I'm John Negroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com, blah, blah, blah. Here's Will Ashton from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, news and entertainment writer at Collider. But Will, we have this is a big episode.
It is a very big episode. I'm very excited for this one.
Because, you know, obviously it's a momentous occasion because we're talking about a book. That's the only reason.
I mean, usually we talk about films, and now we're pivoting into books. This is a literary podcast now.
Movies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. One of the best-selling books of all time, but, you know, when we were talking about, like, Where the Crawdads Sing, we're like, we got to talk about this movie. It's going to be super fun.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Will threatened me.
Man, I accosted you, apparently.
We need an expert. He's like, we need somebody in on this. And I was like, well, that's fine. We can have any guests you want. Just remember, I have an anti-nepotism policy. I hate nepotism. I've never had my own family on here. I mean, Tyrone and Nancy have tried. Like, let's be honest.
I mean, I want Tyrone on the podcast, but you have nixed that.
It's never going to happen.
Oh,
I don't believe in corruption. I don't believe in, dealing in favors. But I made an exception here because Will literally was like, I'll walk. Like, Cinemaholics will be dead to me. So... and I was like, well, Will, I trust you. This must be like the best guest we've had in generations. Speaking of generations, Will, who do we have on docket?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put the pressure on her so soon. I mean, she, is this, I don't know if this is her first time, on a podcast now. I'm going to ask her in a moment, but let me introduce her. So she is a teacher. She is my sister of 25 years. And for the last week, she is sharing my last name. It is my dear sister, Trisha Ashton.
Hello. Yeah.
So hi Trisha. How's it going?
It's going well. That was a lot of pressure I'm feeling. This is my first time podcasting.
Wow.
So yeah, a momentous occasion. But yeah, I will try to live up to that expert status you have given me.
Well, it is a little bit of bluster. I'm known to do that. One of the reasons because, this book, Where the Crawdads Sing, now a movie, major motion picture on the Major Motion podcast. It's one that you're a fan of, right?
Yeah, I would probably argue it is, if not my favorite book, one of my favorite books for sure.
See, okay, so I just want to go right to that, okay? This book comes out in 2018. It's kind of like an upmarket commercial fiction. And I mean, I said this before. It is one of the best-selling books of all time. It's sold 12 million copies as of the beginning of this year. Who knows how much it's sold by now because of the movie tie-in. I was just on Publishers Weekly last night, and I saw that it's been like the number one book overall lately because of the movie. I mean, people are super excited. And, to what we're going to talk about, when I was on the whole Instagram thing, and I was like, hey, everybody, I'm going to go see, Where the Crawdads Sing. So many, usually people are just like, Thor, whatever. Marcel the what? But when it was Where the Crawdads Sing, people are like, my sisters, my mom, my boss, all of these people were just like, is it good? Is it good? Is it good? I need to know if this is good. If you don't tell me it's good, I'll show you Where the Crawdads Sing. Why is this book so popular? I've read a little bit of it. I've been aware of it for a long time. But what is it? How did this capture the zeitgeist?
I think it just is a lot of different things wrapped into one. So there's the coming of age of the main character, that I think a lot of girls just connect to her, just trying to discover the world, just figuring things out, being by herself for a long time. And just, there's also the romantic aspect, of her different love interests and, the battle of love and loss and forgiveness and hurt. But then I think the biggest component is just that whodunit aspect and the trial, and just the way they weave in the different timelines is just really well written, easy to follow, and just really keeps you turning the pages to want to figure out what happened and how she is just going about life. I think that a lot of those things just really grab all the audiences. I'm not sure. I feel like it is predominantly women who it grabs. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on that, but that's kind of the audience I have noticed the most.
Which I think is surprising. I think this is very appealing. Like the book and like the story, very appealing to me, and I assume plenty of other dudes. But it does seem like something that was primarily picked up on by women, at least in my life, anecdotally. What about you, Will?
Well, yeah, because this was what's the name of Reese Witherspoon's book club?
Hello, Sunshine.
Okay, she kind of took over from like Oprah's fire, and like she gave this book her stamp of approval.
She was like, "Look out, Oprah! I'm hot on your tail."
Yeah, I think this was like, if not one of the first, I know this was one of the most notable from that label. Like she like came into it early. I think even before it got published, she's like, "You guys got to check out this book. You guys aren't going to believe it." And kind of similar to like Oprah back in the 2000s when her name was attached to a book, it just became huge. It was on the bestsellers list. It became this big phenomenon, and that might explain why it's primarily women who have read it and seeked it out. But I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, she is a producer on the film as well. Certainly has championed the book and now the film throughout, production. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's based in North Carolina. It's kind of got like that American South. It's Americana. I mean, I think people are kind of like, okay, you know what? We don't get a lot of books like this. We get things like Gone Girl, and that's like in, these urban places. We get a lot of things that are like, I don't know, a little bit coastal. I mean, this is coastal, literally. But I think it's also just like its own kind of thing. It's back in the past. It's got the central mystery. It's got a lot of pieces in its stew. And I was honestly, so some of the listeners know, if they've listened long enough, they're like, oh, well, John grew up in Virginia. And I grew up pretty close to North Carolina. So I must have watched this movie and been like, just like home. But I thought this was in like Louisiana for the longest time until somebody was just like, no, this is what is it like living in North Carolina like we do? And I was like, wait, what? Well, these are the Carolinas?
Didn't they film this in Louisiana?
I bet. I don't actually know, but like I legitimately was like, oh, we're in Louisiana because like the marshes. Like when I think of North Carolina, I think of like OBX and stuff. And so I have a very limited, I haven't lived in North Carolina, right? So I just never picked up on that, I guess, like that part of the state.
Yeah, it was filmed in New Orleans and Louisiana.
So there you go. I mean, it makes sense because, that's more of like a film-friendly kind of, area. But I guess that's immaterial. Like, what is this movie about? We got a lot of stuff to get to. So we kind of got a rundown of the book. The movie, I think, essentially, we're going to have to ask Trish about this. Like, how does it, like, compare, structurally and, like, how many changes and everything. But the basic premise is, as we've kind of discussed, it's about kind of a young girl who grows up in a North Carolina marsh. She was abandoned as a kid. We kind of go back and forth to like how she grew up on her own, kind of dealing with like her drunk father, played by Garrett Dillahunt, and then her adult self, who's played by Daisy Edgar-Jones. We love Daisy Edgar-Jones on this podcast. Well, I do. I don't know. I mean, Will, you seem to think she was okay and fresh, but I've loved her since Normal People.
Yeah, I mean, I've only really seen her in Fresh. Trish, did you know her from anything?
This is the main character, correct?
Yeah, the main actress.
Yeah, I know her from Under the Banner of Heaven. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her.
Oh, yeah.
No, I haven't seen it.
But
been meaning to watch that.
She's one of the main characters in that show.
Cool.
I wonder is that based on a book too? Because Normal People is based on a book I love by Sally Rooney. And so she's just kind of like, hey, you got a book coming into a movie, you hire me.
I don't believe that Under the Banner of Heaven is based on a book. I could be incorrect, but it's kind of an overview. It's about a Mormon family who is using their Mormon religion to do not very ethical or moral things.
It is based on a book. It's based on a nonfiction book also called Under the Banner of Heaven, but it's nonfiction. So I guess it's kind of like the premise, I guess, but it's like its own story.
Yeah. So she's scouring the bestsellers list and just picking projects from there, I guess. Yeah,
she's on top of it. She doesn't have any future projects that I'm seeing here, but she's kind of breaking out a little bit. I mean, I think this movie will be a nice little like, hey, get a little more attention for her. Yeah. But
have you?
Yeah, she's doing well for herself.
Trish, have you read any of Sally Rooney's books? I meant to ask you that earlier.
I do not believe so. No.
I'm surprised.
Consider this a recommendation podcast.
Sure.
Normal People's an important...
wait. I read Normal People. Sorry. Yes, I read that.
Oh, sweet.
Yes.
You should watch, if you haven't seen the show that she's in, I actually, like, normally I'm a little bit like, I like the book more almost in every circumstance. but the Normal People show is actually extremely faithful in like a way that I think it like improves and doesn't like trip up a lot. So I gotta recommend that. It's on Hulu.
Yeah, check that out for sure.
Cinemaholics, all about cinema. So yeah, set up like I was saying.
Yeah, it's so far it's been TV and book recommendations from us at Cinemaholics. Yeah.
We gotta get back to our roots, Will. We got to get back to where we come from. We got to get back to the marsh. So the character's name is Kaya, and she's very interesting. She's very resourceful. She's grown up on her own. She she loves feathers. She's super fun. But she's also a little bit like, obstacle after obstacle. And as we were kind of getting into earlier, there's a central mystery where somebody has been murdered, and everybody is kind of like basically prejudiced against Kaya. They call her the Marsh Girl. They think she's weird and dangerous, and they think she did it. And so we have a character played by David Strathairn who's like, we gotta root into your past, Kaya, to prove everybody you're not a criminal, you're not evil. And she's like, all right, let's do it. And so that's where the Crawdads Sing. It's a nice it's like part coming of age, and then it's also like kind of romance, and it's kind of like a blossoming sort of like adult romantic drama. As a movie, I think it's effective. I mean, I was watching it and I was engrossed. I did have the feeling when I walked out of this that, is this one of those movies where the book is just way too good for this? Because I wasn't wowed by this movie at all. And I certainly wasn't like, when everything was said and done, I was like, wow, what an experience. Like, what didn't see that coming, and none of that. But I did, I was like, okay, this is a movie and it's doing movie stuff. But the reaction I've seen from people with the book is so raw. It's so like, grandstanding, that I was like, man, I don't know if this is going to like really work for the book fans. So I had to tell everybody, I was like, hey, check it out if you're interested. But yeah, it might not give you that same experience you got from the book. But Trish, you are the one we got to ask about this. So like, how does it compare? Did you like this compared to the book? What happened?
I would say that I did enjoy the movie. I was very nervous and apprehensive going in because of how much I liked the book, and just knowing that it's really hard to get all of those packed into a 2-hour movie. And so I would say that with the movie, you did lose some character development, which, you can obviously feel that and get that a lot more in a book. But I feel like they did a pretty good job. They stayed true to the book and got a lot of those really important aspects. I was very nervous at the beginning of the movie because in the book, it doesn't jump back and forth as much as it does in the movie. So when they jumped right in there, I was nervous of how you as an audience were going to connect with Kaya, because obviously you connect a lot more in the book. But they did jump back into her past there. And so I did feel like they did a good job of that, but I was very apprehensive at first with them jumping just right into the court scenes. But yeah, I really enjoyed it as a movie. I would say that I prefer the book, but I feel like they did a good job at capturing all those aspects. And I would recommend people to see it.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned the running time. It's just a little over 2 hours. I honestly thought it was longer. Not in a terrible way, not in a way like, oh my gosh, so long. But I sort of was like, man, that was a lot. Like, I think there's so much story to it. Real quick though, you said it lost in the character development. Do you mean like for Kaya? Do you mean like for a lot of characters?
I would say the biggest one is Jody. There is a lot more character development for him in the book. And so you see a little bit more of Kaya's apprehension to build relationships. When he comes back, she is a lot more apprehensive in the book than in the movie. She just kind of immediately is like, hey, my brother. Where like in the book, it's more realistic of she doesn't recognize him at first, and is kind of more apprehensive to that. And some of the like other characters like Jumpin' and Tate's dad Skipper, things like that. But I would say a lot of
he just gets like a scene. He's like, come on, kid, you gotta help me with these crawdads. He's just like very like he's a worker guy.
Yeah, so he has a lot more, and there's a lot more of Tate and his dad in there, which I think is sweet and kind of it shows more of the tension that Tate feels between her and the outside world. Where in the movie it's just kind of like, hey, I didn't come back because I was doing my thing. Where in the book it's more of there's the tension of he is progressing as his academics and as his professional career. But is that tension between trying to decide, can I bring Kaya into this? Can I bring this to Kaya? Where that's a little bit lost in the movie. But these things are all minors. They got the big points. So yeah, I was impressed about that.
Well said. Well said. Okay. Well, Will, we're the outliers here. I mean, we haven't read the book, so we went into this fresh, no pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come away from it? I mean, this is Olivia Newman. Mm-hmm. Have you seen any of her work before? She did like a Netflix movie called First Match. I didn't see it. I was busy.
I didn't see that either. I know she's done some TV, but I don't remember off the top of my head what TV she has done. So no, I'm not too familiar with her work, I must say. Okay. But yeah, I mean, as far as the movie is concerned, I was very curious to ask Trish about it. So would you say this is like, as far as the story itself, it's fairly faithful to the story? But you're saying some of the character beats kind of get lost in translation?
Yeah, I would say it's very faithful. Okay. There's just like kind of just a couple of things that they changed, very minor. Throughout the book, there's a lot of poetry that, sorry to spoil if anybody hasn't read the book and was to, but you find out like this poet that Kaya really connects to throughout the whole book. In the end, it's her that was that poet, and she was throughout her whole life submitting this poetry under a surname. So that's kind of an aspect that helps you to then, as you look back, you understand a lot of her, and then it connects a little bit with the ending. So that they kind of tweaked, but yeah, other than that, I would say it's very accurate and very true to the book.
Yeah, because the big thing for me, I felt watching movies, I felt very busy. Like it kind of felt like they were constantly kind of moving at a clip where they had to kind of put all these different things in, have to kind of make sure they got to this point, then they got to this point, then we get to this, then we, like we said, we established the murder, then we established all these characters. And it felt almost a little restless to the point where I would have preferred, I guess, if the movie let itself breathe a little bit more. The only moments I really felt kind of slowed down and a little bit more meditative were the more relationship-based moments. Certainly, like when she's kind of in her first love, and then later when she forms another relationship, those moments have a little bit more time to kind of play out and breathe and let the actors get settled into the characters. I felt like a lot of the moments in this film, there was such a restlessness that I didn't really feel equipped to know the characters as well. It just kind of felt like I was knowing about them and how they set the stage for what this mystery was going to be. But I didn't really get a full sense of who they were and how they really connected as far as like outside of the events that led to their lives. And for me, that made the film, unfortunately, a little bit lacking. I think the performances generally were pretty good. And I do think there is something to the story, like Trisha was saying earlier, where it is combining, a coming-of-age story with this sort of like The Killing Mockingbird-esque trial drama. And there is like the mystery and all these different elements. I was impressed by how I was able to kind of combine all those into one story. Even when it wasn't super cohesive, it does feel like it is adding all these elements in a way that didn't feel like too jarring to me in the process of watching the film itself. But at the same time, I did kind of find myself wondering, as John was asking earlier, what is about this book that really makes it come to life compared to the story? And I have to imagine it's more about getting to know Kaya, about her world perspective, kind of understanding her outsider view of things, which feels probably more integral to the book and probably feels a little bit more fleshed out, and therefore you can understand and sympathize with her more. And I feel like the movie, something about that was maybe lost in translation here.
Yeah, I did feel like watching it, it was very like the movie was made for the book readers. And I mean, I went to see it with my fiance who hadn't read the book, and he still really enjoyed the movie. But yeah, again, some of those moments you're talking about, like trying to get all of it in, I feel like they didn't want people to be upset who had read the book of like, oh, this wasn't in there, or this person wasn't in the movie. But that is a hard tension to make a good movie, but also appease the book readers. And I feel like they leaned more to getting the book readers to be happy and satisfied that all of those elements and all the characters had made an appearance and were a part of the movie.
Yeah, I think this is definitely like one of those kinds of things where this is not for critics. I think critics, like when they watch a movie like this, I mean, they want the creative liberties, right? Like they want a little bit more of like, how do you take the book and kind of like really like blast it out, I guess. And this was a little bit safer. And I think that, you know, financially, that's probably a better idea. There were times I was watching this and I was like, this is kind of like, I feel like I'm watching kind of like a Netflix original movie. And that's cool. Like, I'm not sort of like knocking Olivia Newman here necessarily. I think that like, she's just not a very, I think, artistic director. I just don't like, she just kind of frames things and shoots things in a very efficient manner.
Very literal, you could say, I guess.
Very literal, not literary, right? Which is a little bit of like, it was a surprise for me because like, you know, back to like Normal People, I think Normal People had some like really brilliant, you know, moments where they found ways to make this story kind of cinematic. It wasn't always, it was a show, you know, it was a very Hulu kind of show, but it just felt a little bit more artistic, I guess. Where this, I don't know, I got a little bit more of like a laid back quality to it, which is fine because I think a lot of people won't care and they'll just be sucked into the story. And it's like, let's just give make the characters the stars. Like that's the point, isn't it? Like let them just sort of shine, show the relationships, have people being like, oh my gosh, can you believe? But yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's melodramatic. That's what you want. Box office wise, it's not doing super great. I mean, it's made
really?
17 million. Yeah, I mean, it's made 17 million opening weekend, and I think some people were expecting that, but they were like, you know, what if this is like, what if the book readers really come out for this? And they did not. Not really. I mean, there were book clubs that came out to see this, but I don't know. I think there are people who really like the book and are curious, but are not so curious that they're going to rush out and see this in a theater. I think they're like, if this had been on Netflix, if this had been on Hulu, and had been, you know, oh my gosh, it would be like super buzzy in those circles. But of course, you wouldn't have the box office revenue. So I think the strategy is what it is.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, the thing that surprised me the most, and it's becoming sort of a cliched criticism, but I am sort of surprised this wasn't a miniseries. Like, or it wasn't expanded into like a few episodes because
it's a cliched miniseries because it happens a lot.
I know, yeah. Well,
You know?
cliched criticism, yeah.
Criticism,
yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's better or worse for that. If anything, I actually kind of like that had sort of like a 90s feel where like the book itself is sort of the star, like the drawing power for it. And I feel like it's been a while since we've had something like that where it's like this big.
Well, yeah, to what you're saying, Big Little Lies. This could have been a Big Little Lies.
Right, sure.
Right?
Yeah, another Reese Witherspoon produced and in that case starring show. But I mean, to her credit, like, you know, something like Wild, you know, she produces that and that's like a really tremendous movie as well.
Nonfiction, yeah.
Right, nonfiction, true. But I mean, or like Gone Girl, like she produces that, and that's, you know, a terrific film.
Well, with Gone Girl, that thing was always like from the ground up, like we are going to do this in the fall, and it's going to be a Best Picture contender. Sure. And that's the thing; you don't always know what a movie like that is going to be like that. Or in this case, maybe they thought that maybe before they set the release date, they're like, we're going to put this out at TIFF. This is going to, or Telluride. This is going to be a big Americana sort of thing. It's going to go for Best Picture, and then they're like, actually, no, late July.
Yeah, I mean, it's just surprising to put this in the summer movie season, like you're suggesting. Right. It does seem kind of more of like a friendlier release for the fall. Maybe it's because, like you said, it's like, you know, it takes place like in like a very sunny like area. It has a very like summery feel to it. Maybe they just felt like that would translate well, and with the success of the book, maybe they just felt like it would be kind of a blockbuster type of release. But to an earlier point of yours, I was going to say, I think one of the bigger criticisms I did have of this film is that it felt like a lot of telling over showing. Like there's a lot of times where we just hear Kaya explaining things and made me feel like, oh, I just rather would listen to the audio but hear her talk because she seems like a very interesting character, but I'm only getting kind of a limited perspective from her watching the film. But that's not really a criticism of the central performance. I think that's just more of the film itself, not really having as much time to really develop her character compared to the book.
Yeah, I think the performances are good. Like all of them are good except for a couple. Can I say that some of the performances that I'm just like, no. The boys. I mean, look, you all know I've been Team Tate my whole life. Except, you know, there's a scene where Kaya's throwing stuff at Tate. And I'm like, yeah, good. But at the same time, I was like, Tate, you need to get in there. You need to clean up your mess. There's this other character, Chase Andrews, who is just. This is the guy from Beach Rats. When I see him in a movie, I'm just like, okay.
Oh, that's what he's from.
You know,
Okay.
he's going to give us like a slow burn kind of thing. He's going to be this character who we're just like, Kai, you stay away from that young man. However, in this, he's cartoonish, isn't he? I feel like in the book, he probably was a little bit more of like, okay, can she trust this guy? What's going on with this guy? And then like, as he sort of develops, you know, of course, what happens. But I don't know. I feel like these guys are playing these parts so like maybe it's because they're right next to Daisy Edgar-Jones, who's just like running laps around them. She's just like, oh, you guys, like, did you read the scripts? You're right. That's pretty harsh. I don't know. What did you think of the performances, Trish?
I would agree that, I mean, for Tate, I kind of felt indifferent. But yeah, I was disappointed with how Chase Andrews was played, just because I feel like it's a very dynamic character, that he kind of changes, where he has his softer moments, where Kaya he is letting Kaya in, and then where, you know, he's harsher. And I felt like he was just kind of more of a constant even, instead of getting that kind of intricate balance. I feel like safe is the word. Like he just played it kind of safe, where I don't feel like in the book Chase was necessarily a safe character. So I feel like some of that was lost in his development and kind of understanding more of where Kai is at because of that changing character. So yeah, that was a little disappointing.
I think that's well said. Yeah. Did you have a take, Will? Because there is I have a little bit of a thing to add to this, but I want to hear your take.
I mean, yeah. So Harris, what's his name? Harris Dickinson.
Harris Dickinson is the actor who plays Chase Andrews.
Right. I mean, I think his performance in Beach Rats is just like, it's a very beautifully subtle performance, and I think he really captures the nuance of that character, Frankie, in that film really well. And I feel like this movie, like you're suggesting, I felt like they focused too much on his like inherent badness coming into it, to the point where it didn't really feel like much of a mystery what was going to happen. It's like as soon as he comes on the screen, I'm like, oh, this guy's no good. I don't want
like
him
that
around.
In Kingsman, right? Because
Okay,
he was in Kingsman as well, and he was also kind of like, I don't know, he was like a wet blanket. It's like, we know you're good at acting, dude. What's going on?
I mean, maybe just better suited for indie dramas. I don't know. It just seems like maybe. I mean, you could. He brings like an interesting flavor to the part. Like there is something kind of like sleekly, kind of grossly charismatic about him. But I don't know. It just didn't really. I don't know. I think it's more just how they portrayed the part. Just because it just felt like there wasn't much mystery as far as like, I know this guy's bad. I'm just kind of waiting for the shoe to drop with him.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's probably better played in the book, where you spend more time and probably get to know Chase better and kind of see some of his virtues maybe more as a character. So the things that might charm him to Kaya, you know, especially because like it seems like from what you're telling us, Trish, like Kaya is probably like world weary person. She's not someone who's just going to let her guard down easy. So it just seems like as soon as if Kaya really saw this guy, it'd be like, oh, she knows this guy's no good. Like, just you see him and you see Harris Dickinson, it's like, this guy's no good. I'm not dealing with him. Like, but what, so like, yeah,
that's one of the missed opportunities I think of the movie, is that it doesn't create a very strong discrepancy between like the marsh and like the town, and sort of like it barely dabbles in sort of like the class structures there. It has this sort of thing where like she's the marsh girl, people kind of just hate her and look down on her, but she also looks like Daisy Edgar-Jones, so it's like, it's weird. There's something like really not working for me there, where it's like, the prejudice against her as an adult is very odd, and like even when she's a kid, it just seems very like overhauled. Like we got to really like dial that in for some reason. And I don't know. I wanted a little bit more of like, well, what's up with this town? What is up with these people? Like why are they so like, these hierarchical systems that they have going on? What's going on here? Why, you know, that would have made the central mystery a little bit more compelling. It would have added more tension to the trial. Instead, I find all these characters to be cartoonish. So like when David Strathairn is like the one person who has like humanity, I don't know, it feels a little bit out of place. It feels a little bit of like, okay, maybe you're trying to play me like a string right now.
Yeah, the one scene in particular that I was a little off put by was when she initially met Chase and all the people were at the beach and she was just kind of sitting there sketching or whatever. Where in the book, like she would never have lingered there with the people. Anytime she kind of saw people around in her marsh, she was hiding or running away. So that was, I think that also kind of like it just like Chase just walked up to her where in the movie.
Why wouldn't he? She looks amazing, and I mean, there's nothing about her that you're just like, oh my gosh, what a marsh girl wearing clothes like the rest of us, living her life.
Yeah, that was a little kind of like a stretch of, kind of taking a lot of the different like years in the book and just smushing them into a couple of seconds there.
It was the 1960s. We forgot to mention it's not like modern day or anything. This is this whole story takes place like from the 50s to the 60s.
Yeah.
There's also there are also these characters who I thought were going to be a bigger deal. They kind of are, I guess, but there are two black characters in this, prominent black characters, and they kind of like from a young age kind of help Kaya out. What was your take on those characters, Will? Because I kind of was a little bit confused by them at times, and I was a little bit like, are we kind of messing around with some like very like whitewashed racial platitudes here? How did that play for you?
Well, that's another thing I really want to know more about from the book. Like, are those kind of more drawn out characters in the book, or is that pretty faithful to how they are portrayed in the novel?
No, they're really big characters in the book.
Okay.
And I think that that's not really shown, but especially Jumpin' is someone who is 100% like Kaya's fatherly figure. When she's abandoned. And they showed a little bit, but they did a lot to support her. Like he bought some different things that she caught that he clearly wasn't going to sell. But they did a good job of supporting her and providing her kind of quote unquote charity things, but allowing it to not feel like charity because she wouldn't accept that. Whereas in the movie, it's just like, oh, here are these clothes. And she's like, well, great. I love this.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah. Cause
well, before we go move on, I think your phone was being blocked by something because your audio kind of like changed a little bit. I don't know if like the speaker got kind of like.
Oh no, I might have been bumped.
Oh, there you go.
There you are. Now you're back.
Yeah.
I was going to say I was kind of confused by how the film portrayed race, especially considering like, this is like deep South in the 50s. And we really only have like two prominent black characters. Like this is around the same time as To Kill a Mockingbird, as we mentioned, even down to the point where I was half wondering if there would be a scene where like, David Strahan is talking to Kaya and then you just see like Atticus Finch in the other cell. Like, can you keep it down? I'm talking to my client over here.
Yeah, we got a courtroom over here. Yeah. I don't know why we're doing New York.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, you're the one doing
we got
the
a courtroom over here. What's she doing?
Anyway. But yeah, I mean, I did feel like their characters kind of verged into stereotype in a sort of outdated way. And I was hoping that wasn't in the book. But I kind of figured there'd be more nuance in the novel as opposed to the film. It just kind of felt like their characters didn't really feel sincere to me. It just kind of felt like a very Hollywood take on race, especially in this time and in this place.
Yeah, I think it's emblematic of like, I think the major shortcoming of the movie. I think it's effective enough, but I think it like has these things and it just doesn't really like go any deeper than here are two black characters in the South being fatherly figures. There is racism, and then next scene. We gotta go. We got another scene. We got three more. So that's kind of how this whole movie is really.
No, yeah, that's really true. Because there are a lot more nuances in the book of just the racism that they experienced. Like there was a time when Kaya went out to their house to see them. And like there were kids that were throwing rocks at Jumpin'. And she came in and kind of like whacked them, and stood up for him. And then especially like during the court times, like they were not allowed in the court, and the judge made a big deal to allow them to be there. So there are different things like that were in the book that, I mean, you can't capture it all, but yeah, that was definitely something that they kind of allowed to be lost in the movie.
Yeah, they could have had In the Heat of the Night also, like Kill a Mockingbird was like the next day, and The Heat of the Night was a couple days later. Yeah. I only had one other thing to talk about, and that is like kind of the controversy around this book. But I think it's kind of related to spoilers. So here's what I want to do.
Well, before we get into that, I feel like we've been kind of negative, and I wanted to hear more from Trish about like what she really liked about the film.
To say, let's just do like a final, like, okay, let's sum it up.
Okay.
Play the Rotten Tomatoes game, and then finish it out with the controversy stuff, the juicy drama. But yeah, Trish, you're kind of just like final impression. Is there anything else you want to get? Anything else positive you wanted to get to? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I did really enjoy the movie. I'm not sure, again, like how much of that I would have enjoyed equally, having not read the book. I mean, I read the book twice, and both times I was really engaged, and even though kind of knew the outcome, knew how it was going to end, was still page turning. Whereas in the movie, I kind of was sitting back more of like, oh, I definitely know how this is going to be. But I feel like they did a pretty good job capturing all the different characters. One twist of the movie that I actually liked a little bit better than the book is I feel like they gave Kaya a little more emotion. So in the book, she is very apprehensive to all people, especially during all the court hearings and the court scenes. She is very disengaged, not listening, having a hard time. Which is understandable, not being a part of civilization. But I think that was something that in the book I wanted her to have more emotion, and just kind of to be a little more on edge of if she is going to get the death penalty or not. But yeah, so that was one positive for the movie that was something that in the book I felt kind of lacking. But I mean, overall, I feel like everybody is always going to say they like the book more than the movie. And they clearly tried to really get all those aspects in for the book readers and the book lovers. And so I feel like they did a good job for them. So yeah, I mean, I recommend it to a friend, and definitely enjoyed my time watching it.
Excellent. I was going to ask you, have you ever been to North Carolina?
Not that I recall.
Have either of you been?
No, I have not been to North Carolina.
It doesn't really look like that. I know I'm hung up on it, but like, I mean, maybe there are like marshes that kind of look like that, but like, I don't know. The entire time I was like, this isn't, Taylor Swift wrote a song called Carolina for this.
Oh yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah. So, good song. I was going to say, I like that song.
I thought it was okay. I mean, I don't really remember how it went, but it was playing over the credits, and I was just like, is there going to be an end credit scene? No.
I definitely think the song was going to be a more part of it. I felt like that was a very big media thing.
Was it?
Like Kaya's like running through the marsh, trying to find Tate. Where are you? And Carolina's playing.
Yeah.
The birds were going to sing it. The Crawdads. Sorry, the Crawdads. I was hoping we're going to. The
what
Crawdads.
What movie you think we're watching?
Oh man.
One other thing I was going to mention before you do your spiel, Will, is Olivia Newman is going to be making, like, she's not done with like book adaptations. Oh, okay. She's already on it. So she's working on a mini series for The Last Thing He Told Me, which is a book that I've read. Maybe I can be a guest on our own podcast. The Laura Dave book. No, The Last Thing He Told Me is actually kind of a good. It's kind of in the same vein. So she's got a niche. So that's what we can expect next from her. But yeah, anyway, Will, your last thought on Where the Crawdads Sing. Spoiler free, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, I mean, I guess it just left me wanting to read the book more than anything. I felt like the story was interesting, and while I did enjoy the central performance, I did find myself kind of wondering more about like what made this book such a phenomenon. I mean, hearing from Trish, I get a better understanding of that, but when I was watching the film, I didn't really get that sense. Like I was kind of just left wondering what was the draw here, what was really kind of making this such a compelling read. And I think the central character is very interesting, and I certainly like Daisy. Is it Daisy Edgar-Jones? That's the actress here.
Daisy, you got it. Okay. Daisy Edgar-Jones, Irish actress.
I really like she's very naturalistic as a performer, I think. Certainly from what I've seen from, her doing like a genre film like Fresh, which is also really balancing a lot of tones. I think she can be very grounded, very sincere as a performer, and I think that did a lot to ground that film as well. And I think, there's a lot here, even when the story can feel kind of busy. I think she brings a lot of life, brings a lot of nuance to this performance. I think that was certainly a draw. I just didn't really feel like the narrative really honored that performance in that way. It just kind of felt like it was constantly trying to, like we said, hit all the big bookmarks, try to make sure it got everything that the readers wanted, kind of knowing that like if they missed out a lot of big things, there'd be all these complaints. And I think that's fine as far as seeing it as a fan of the book, but as a film, it just kind of felt a little uneven and maybe not quite as lived in as it could have been ultimately. So I don't know. I find myself a little underwhelmed, but you know, I can see the appeal at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say with Daisy Edgar-Jones, very good actress. She is better than normal people because I think the character is more interesting. But like in both of these roles, she's playing like somebody who's kind of ostracized by society. I think it's a little bit more believable in normal people because, you know, she's Daisy Edgar-Jones. But I think like in both of these roles and in Fresh to an extent too, she's just an actress who I think is just really good at like knowing what to do with her eyes. Like the way that she kind of like stares at things and lets things kind of like translate from what she's feeling to what her eyes are doing. It is a kind of unique thing. It's hard to do as a performer. And so I just think that she has a real knack for it. And that's, I think, why she's getting roles like this, because she's done like moody sort of like, you know, like we said, melodramatic, you know, kind of a woman on the outs. I'm very curious, like more stuff like Fresh. How's that going to go for her? Where she's a little bit more of like, you know, the straight man character, you know, just kind of like, you know, your average kind of everyday casual person getting caught up in something wild and unpredictable. I think I'd love to see how she can handle roles like that. So, and also a credit to the young actress Jojo Regina, who we didn't mention, who plays Kaya when she's little. I thought she was very, very strong. Like she has to carry like a big chunk of this movie, like more than I thought. I was like, well, that's her as a kid. Now we're going to jump over to more of her. Like, you know, they didn't do the Captain Marvel thing where it's just like 4 different child actors in a row, and then we go right to Brie Larson. But anyway, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. So, Trisha, I don't know if you've ever listened to the show, I guess recently, when we've played the Rotten Tomatoes game. Do you know how it works? I can explain it. It's easy.
I don't think I know this game.
Okay. It's a fun game, America's favorite game show. Will Ashton likes it because he always wins. Usually he plays by himself, though. That's the thing. It's simple. Have you seen the Rotten Tomatoes score of Where the Crawdads Sing? Hopefully not.
I have not, no.
Perfect. It's a guessing game. We're going to try. You and Will are going to compete. You know, we're going to see who knows Where the Crawdads Sing when it comes to critics. That's what we're going to find out. So
if they're singing its praises or not, you could say.
Or if they're a little flat. So let's find out. So we have 115 critics gave this movie a score on Rotten Tomatoes. I never did review it. I meant to, and I just didn't. I'm very sorry. But we have somebody else reviewing it for the young folks, and she hasn't seen it yet, I don't think, but that's going to be coming soon. But anyway, 115 reviews. Percentage-wise, we'll start with you, Will. Give her a little bit of an advantage. Give Trish an advantage here. So, okay. Will, what do you think? Where do you think the tomato meter is at for this one?
I think critics are divided. I don't know. It seems like a lot of people on my Letterboxd timeline are not really responding to it, or a little lukewarm on it. But I imagine, you know, like we said, like a lot of critics who have read the book probably are more familiar with it, probably like it more, maybe more forgiving of it. But I imagine the score is probably split for that reason. So I'm going to say 54%.
Okay, that's your guess. 54. Trish, what do you think? Do you think your brother knows as much about movies as he thinks he does?
Yeah, I think he's
definitely.
I'm still going to give it a try. I don't really have much of an explanation, but my gut just said 76, so I'm going to go with that.
It's a good guess.
Okay, well, I got bad news for both of you.
Okay.
This thing is at 37%.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wait, what? That's super low. Like, come on. 37%. I think critics are having they're in their feelings or something, because this movie is not that bad. I mean, come on. 37%. That's way low.
Did you do the Metacritic too, or do you want me to pull that up?
Yeah, you can pull that up if you want. I don't know what the Metacritic is. Yeah, I assume it's similar. It usually is like lower than the Rotten Tomatoes.
I'm just curious if it's.
We do have.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do have the audience score. Now, who
okay.
knows about this one, right? We have 1,000+ verified ratings. Forget the critics. The critics, they had their reviews, they had their fun. But what about audiences? What do they think? We'll start with you again, Will.
I think they're going to be notably higher on this one. Kind of going off of Trisha's response. I'm going to say 84%.
Okay. And Trish, what do you think?
I'm going to stick with my 76.
Okay. Well, Will, you are technically closer because it's higher than that. It's 96%.
Wow. Okay.
Well, that's
Audience? Yeah. Of course. I think audiences are like, yeah, I liked it. I mean, what? Come on. I mean, what? It's a movie. It's 2 hours. Like, they had fun. They had their popcorn. I don't know. I think critics are being a little harsh here.
Got some wine, met up with the book club, went to the movies, had a good time. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, my screening had like a bunch of book clubs show up. Like they were invited and stuff. Yeah, and they had the time of their lives. It was nice to see.
Trish, are you in a book club?
Okay, you got it.
I don't know if I've ever asked you that before.
I am not in a book club.
You should be in a book club, I think.
That's a touchy subject.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you have to get the right group.
Yeah, that's true.
And
you should.
And I just am not really fully there on their picks. I have been in a forced book club at work, so.
Oh, really? What's a forced book club?
Oh, those are not fun. I haven't been in a book club since I lived in Virginia. California, the book clubs here, I mean, no thanks. I'll leave it at that.
Trisha, you should start a book club. I think you'd be a great book club host.
That is a great point. I will consider that.
Yeah.
Isn't there a really good a podcast specifically for book movies? I forget what it's called. It's like Popcorn
Is that
Book Club or something like that.
The Dana Schwartz one?
I don't remember who does it. I listened to it before though, and I remember it was interesting. That's a good idea for a book club. It's like, yeah, let's look at these movie tie-ins before they come out and then judge them.
Sure,
sounds like fun. Anyway, okay, not Box Office Mojo, Cinema Score. What am I thinking? So for Cinema Score, I don't know if you're familiar with Cinema Score, Trisha, but idea is that there are. Will likes to explain it. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a group in Vegas who, for some reason, pull every one of their audiences as far as how they respond to film, and suddenly they are determining what the nationwide and even worldwide response to the film is. I don't know.
To be fair, because people from all over go to Vegas. I think that's the idea, Will.
So we say, but I don't know if they're going to these screenings. They're probably going to the casinos and the hotels, and they're seeing like Celine Dion
have
or
all kinds of like prizes. Yeah, no, they did the slot machines. Like now you can go see Where the Crawdads Sing. Come on, Will.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they're appealing to like the people who've lost a bunch of money in Vegas, but they're there for another day, and they're like, "Hey, you want a free screening? Like free? I can't lose out of that, And they see a movie, and then maybe they hate the movie or love it. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't get why they're so important, but. Whatever. Metascore is something we pull.
They pull the audiences, and so you get like an average score, like a test rating. So highest you can get is an A+, and then the lowest you can get is an F. Notoriously, Cinema Score tends to be like higher than like it's not like Rotten Tomatoes. But Will, what do you think the Cinema Score is? What do you think?
I think certainly going off the audience score for Rotten Tomatoes, I think they're probably digging it. I'm gonna say A-.
Okay, Trish, what do you think? You could go higher than Will. You could go same. You could go lower. What do you think?
I'm thinking a B+.
Okay, that's what Thor was last week.
It's a good guess. I was thinking that too, but my gut said go higher, but we'll see.
Your gut was right, Will, because it's an A- exactly.
There we go.
So So far, Will, you're kind of dominating here, but Trish has one last chance to show you up.
Do I do the Metacritic?
Oh, you have the Metacritic? Did you look it up?
Yeah. So Metacritic is similar to Rotten Tomatoes, except they average the score a little bit more closely to like what the critics are responding, as opposed to Rotten Tomatoes, which is more of a general like if they like it or dislike it. Like even if like they gave it like 1 star or like 2.5 out of 5, it's still are rotten, whereas this is a little bit more cumulative as far as like here's what all the critics are giving this rating wise. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
But similar things from like 0 to 100. What would you think the Metascore would be for Where the Crawdads Sing?
I'm gonna go with 82.
Wow. Okay. So this is for the critics.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, we could do the audience too. I mean, if you want to do
so there's
the user score
for this.
So there's there's a user score and then there's a Metacritic score. So we'll say, what did you say, 84?
No, I said 82.
Oh, 80, okay. So you want to do 8.2 for the user score, and then what do you want to do for the Metacritic score?
Let's see. Maybe 54, 5.4.
Okay. How about you, John? We'll let you guess.
Well, I think it's going to be higher than the Rotten Tomatoes because I think the Rotten Tomatoes is so binary, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be that much higher because I think I have seen on I haven't cheated, but I've seen Letterboxd like the ratings that people are giving. So I think it's probably going to be in the 40s. I'm just going to go with an even kind of split and say 45.
And what about for the user score? Since we're guessing
For the user score, I'm gonna say 92.
Oh, wow, okay.
I don't know.
Well, you're certainly closer, John, as far as the meta score, which is 44. But Trisha's a lot closer to the user score, which is 7.6.
Okay.
So, there you go.
There you go. So, Trish, you got your first win. And, okay. And then, this has been a lot. More than we usually do. Okay. Last is Letterboxd. On letterboxd.com, 5.7 thousand people have watched this. That's very, very low. People are not coming out on the Letterboxd community is not on top of this one. But we have an average rating. This one is 0 to 5. So, for example, I think like Thor: Love and Thunder was like, 3.3, or maybe it was just like 3 split. But yeah, Will, what do you think the Letterboxd is?
My gut's saying 3.0. That might be a little high, but that's what I'm feeling.
Okay. And what do you think, Trish?
I'm going to go 2.7.
Okay. It is 3.1. I mean, good strategy. I would have gone lower too. But no, it's a little, it perked up a little bit. I mean, I don't see any positive reviews from like fans of the show here.
Sure.
But also not a lot of fans of like friends of the show have even seen it.
Well,
so
yeah,
there you go.
I mean, my thinking was just that if it's like a mix of like the critics that we're talking about and the audiences that are really liking it, it would probably be a more even split on Letterboxd. So that was my line of thinking for 3.0.
Before we say goodbye, we were going to get into some controversy, but it is a little bit spoiler filled. So if you haven't seen the movie and you're like, okay, I got what I needed, yeah, we'll see you later. But we are going to talk about stuff that kind of has to do with the ending of this movie. You don't want to know this if you actually plan on seeing the movie. So this is your warning.
And now, you know what? We'll say spoiler rating for the book too. Why not?
If I guess so. Yeah. Because, I assume that's a given. So it's kind of wild what happened, and I use that word specifically, with the actual author of the book. So the author of the book, we've kind of mentioned her, Delia Owens, who kind of like ran into some controversy here. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but essentially she was on like a wildlife preserve and straight up murdered somebody, and it's on camera, and people are like, okay, she murdered like a poacher.
Oh, really?
And people,
okay,
right, and people are like, well, that's interesting considering this was in Zambia, by the way. That's interesting considering, and this happened in the 90s. This movie is sort of about how the main character, we find out she straight up murdered that boy, and I thought that was obvious. Like I when we were in the trials, like, oh, she killed him. I mean, of course she did. Like they're trying to make it seem like, one of these boys swept in, but it's not that kind of movie. This is the movie with the female character. And as soon as they go into like the montage that they're growing older, it's like, okay, when is he going to find the necklace and some kind of thing that she worked on? So they kind of, I don't know, that none of that was very surprising, but it is sort of like a dark note that the movie ends on, where it's just like, was she in the right? Should she have done this? And I think the failure of the movie is to really sell like the morality of it, or like the twistiness of it. And I wonder if they were trying to, because I think I don't think this controversy was like super out there when they were making this movie. I could be wrong, but yeah, let's talk about it. Trish? Were you aware of like all this stuff going on?
So I just heard a little bit about this, like on our way to the movie theater. So I didn't do a ton of research into her, as in the author. I will say I felt like in the book, it was a little more unsure of who it was. Definitely high contender for possibly being Tate. Just being there were more scenes of his character being protective of her, and her or him kind of like being more active in trying to steer her away from Chase. In the book,
that's why, can I say, it surprises me so much in the movie, at least, that nobody seems to suspect anybody else.
Yeah.
They suspect her. And it's like, well, wouldn't you suspect her like longtime boyfriend who just got back to town, who's super protective of her and like was witnessed fighting the guy? Like, it just seems really weird that like he's free and clear of suspicion, but this woman who, like, yeah, it's odd.
There's also a scene in the book where after the trial, when she's still uncertain of if she's going to like open herself up for Tate again, and so she's like trying to approach him in her boat in the water, and then the sheriff comes and takes Tate away, and so that kind of leans more of like, oh, like maybe it is Tate, so that, and it kind of like piques your interest of like, oh, like they're still trying to figure out what had happened, whereas in the movie it's just kind of like, oh, done, we're done figuring this out. So yeah, I feel like that kind of helped to make it a little less obvious.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I should mention, I should clarify a little bit. So Delia Owens, she was with her then husband and her son.
I was gonna say, I thought it was
she's
something
wanted for questioning.
Right. I thought it was something with her son being accused of murder, and like her like maybe helping him or having information she was withholding from the police. But it's just the fact that she was involved in any sort of real life murder, you know, escaped, and then a couple decades later wrote a novel about a woman on trial for murder is just such a bizarre turn of events.
Which I mean, I could see her just being like, "It's a coincidence. I had the story."
I just felt like I really understood this character. I don't know. I just don't know. Just really can't.
Yeah, are you justified? I mean, a poacher. I mean, most people would be like, poachers are terrible. They hurt the animals, and so you know, she very much is a conservationist, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of getting to the thing with the movie, and I guess the book too, is that like, is she justified to do it? And it seems like the movie is very much like, yes, like he was a terrible person.
He's a predator.
He's a predator. Yeah. He was going to rape her. Like, he was a bad person. He deserved to die, basically. And I don't know. It's just like, so the movie doesn't even really have any sort of like doubt as far as like whether or not she was in the wrong or right. It's more about whether or not she did or didn't do it. But it seems like we're suggesting.
Is it more ambiguous in the book then? That's the thing that I'm so curious about, like in terms of like the morality trait. Like, do you walk away from the book being just like, yeah, had happened, or is it sort of just like, huh, you know, that's something to chew on, or both?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that necessarily in the book you like are fully supporting her. I think it's more like that morality of like, well, but yeah, and I think also the book goes more into like how pre-planning she had to be, because they really break it down in the trial of how little amount of time she had and had to like disguise herself and all that stuff during the trial. But yeah, I wouldn't say that the book necessarily is as much of the movie. It was like, oh yeah, that had to happen. But yeah, I would say it's a similar feeling, I guess.
Can I say, I can be a little bit of a softie. I know, Will's probably like, yeah, sure. But, when they were doing the montage at the end and they're growing old together, and I got a little bit of like, well, that's nice, and I was a little bit like, we're going to get to the point, obviously, but I didn't expect it to be when like she was like super old, but just like, I don't know. I like the ending on that note, I guess. Like, I kind of liked that this person had this kind of, happy ending, and, the thing with her mom, and I was like, oh, like this is okay. Let's end it here. But we're going to show the shell. But then I guess like they show he like gets rid of it for her and like all that stuff. Was that part of the book too? That's all I was kind of leading up to, I guess. But
yeah,
like where he sort of goes
it's
away.
Pretty similar, just a little bit different. Like how I talked about the poetry aspect. So in the book, he was like moving some stuff around in the house and had found like a floorboard that was like not connected or whatever. And saw that it was under there with all the poems. And then there was a poem about how she talks about how fireflies, how they like lure them in, and then like devour their mate. And so it was kind of like a poem explaining that like she lured him in, and then the shell was with it. And so he like burned all of the poems and got rid of the shell. So that I felt like in the book, it was more hidden, where he just kind of like found it in a book in their living room, which they obviously would have like fully searched her house. So that I was a little bit unsure of.
They saw because it was like a diary, right? Wouldn't they have looked at something like that?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, hey, it's like, hey, Marco, I got a diary here with pictures of the accused. Put it down, Smartman. Like, we don't have time. Like, what happened?
Yeah, which in reading the book, because I reread it just the past couple weeks in leading up to the movie, that was one thing that I had forgotten about all the poetry, and I was interested in how they were going to do that. So that was kind of a way of, they were like, well, a diary. But yeah, I was interested. Like, it wasn't even hidden. Like, that was a little weird.
So yeah, do you have anything, Will Ashton? I mean, I know you're a big fan of, not yet. I know you're not a big fan of poaching.
Yeah, sure. Be on the record as being anti-poaching right now. But no, I mean, I was gonna say, because it's not like a spoiler, but it relates to a spoiler, so I didn't want to say it during the main recording. But one of my favorite lines in the movie is when, like it's revealed she's not guilty. Everyone's celebrating. She's going down the line of like all the people that like are in her corner, basically, and she sees her editor, and like just as soon as she got away with murder. In this case, or just got off, was ruled not guilty. He's just like, can't wait for book 2. Like, he can't even wait. Like, like he's
also said some. She's reportedly said some like pretty terrible things about African people.
Are you talking about the author
in general?
You mean
the author? Yeah.
Okay, I was talking just like the editor character in the film. Like, he's just like, can't wait for book 2. Like, he's just like a real editor, I guess. Just can't wait for that next story.
Yeah, I think they were to capture some of her emotions in the book, because in the book it said how she was like so embarrassed that the one person who didn't judge her as like the marsh person had to be drawn into this. And so it was kind of that, like, in the book she didn't want to go up to him at the end because she was embarrassed that he was there, and like he kind of eased it of like meeting her of like, oh yeah, like, don't worry about it, don't sweat it, like, we'll move on. But yeah, I did kind of feel like they were throwing that in as a book part, but you didn't get the other stuff, so it was just kind of confusing.
That makes more sense. Yeah, just the way that he delivered that line was just very funny to me.
Okay, so we've gone about an hour, and I think we've basically covered it, so let's end it there, I suppose. Where the Crawdads Sing, it's now playing in theaters. I'm not sure, like, because this is Sony, I'm not sure if it's going to be on any kind of like streaming in a couple of months. It doesn't have like a very obvious destination.
Crackle Plus.
Crackle Plus. We got. I mean, I could see it being on like Netflix for a few months or something like that.
Sony has a deal now with Netflix, so it is going to go onto Netflix at some point.
Don't they still like put things on other things at times? Or am I making that up in my head?
Well, I know there's some
put
weird
you on
thing.
The spot. I didn't mean to get you all flustered. Well,
no, I mean, I think you're referring to like the Spider-Man movies, where like because they have a deal with Disney, they might be on a different service, like Stars or something.
Maybe. I was thinking, okay, yeah.
But I think I think their deal with Stars is ending, and it's going to go. Everything is just going to go straight to Netflix if it's not already going to Netflix after a certain window of time.
Trish, thank you for coming on to the show, showing your brother up, embarrassing up, left down and up, left down, right, sideways. And congrats on your upcoming wedding. That's super exciting.
Thank you. It was fun to be on here, and definitely very excited for the wedding.
Yeah. I know it's about to go down, so we'll let you get back to the planning and all that fun stuff. I just had my wedding in May, and it was fantastic. It was a fantastic time, and Will came in clutch. I don't know if you know the whole story for that. But no, super glad we could have you on and to inform us on all this book stuff. It was really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me on. It was fun.